A bound Coptic manuscript sits inside the British Library in London, catalogued under the reference Additional MS 5114. It has been held there since 1785. 354 pages of vellum intact. No public handling is permitted. Institutional access only by formal request. The text it contains describes, by name, exactly what meets the soul at the moment of death. The Church never wanted you to read it. Banned, buried, called dangerous. During the 2nd through 4th centuries, as Christian authorities consolidated the official canon, texts like this one were systematically removed, condemned by councils, destroyed by decree. The communities that preserved them were labeled heretics, and their libraries were scattered or burned. Then, in 1945, an Egyptian farmer digging near the cliffs of Nag Hammadi struck a sealed jar. Inside it, 52 texts resurfaced. Writings that had not been read openly in over 1,500 years suddenly had a manuscript number, a custodian, and a translator. What those texts describe is not the death the Church teaches, not a moment of divine judgment, not a passage into light or darkness based on moral accounting. What they describe is a navigated gauntlet, a structured sequence of encounters the soul must pass through, each one governed by a named entity with specific demands. In the next several minutes, you will see what 3 separate ancient texts record about that sequence, what modern research has independently documented in the same territory, and why the precision of these accounts is nearly impossible to explain away. If forbidden biblical history is what you come here for, hit subscribe. Every week, we uncover what was removed. The Berlin Gnostic Codex 8502 has been held at the Egyptian Museum of Berlin since its acquisition in 1896. The manuscript itself dates to the 5th century. The text it carries is older. Karen L. King, professor at Harvard Divinity School, produced the critical English translation in 2003, the edition that finally brought the full Coptic text into scholarly circulation. The document is known as the Gospel of Mary, and what it records about death is not metaphor. It is a sequence. The Coptic term used throughout is psyche, the soul. Not a concept, not a symbol. The soul, treated as a distinct entity that moves, that speaks, that is interrogated. After the death of the body, the psyche begins an ascent, and on that ascent it does not travel freely. It passes through 7 powers. The text names them. Each power holds a position along the ascending path. Each one confronts the soul directly. Each one speaks first, announcing itself, declaring its nature, its dominion, and each one demands an answer. The soul must respond correctly, or it cannot pass. King's translation renders the first power as darkness, the second, desire, the third, ignorance, then zeal for death, then the kingdom of the flesh, then the foolish wisdom of the flesh, and the 7th, the wisdom of the wrathful person. 7 stations, 7 interrogations, 7 named gatekeepers standing between the soul and what lies beyond them. Now consider what this text would have required its author to know. The internal geography of the post-mortem state, the specific character of each threshold, the precise order in which they appear, the fact that the soul speaks, that it gives account, rather than simply passing or failing. This is not the vocabulary of a general afterlife belief. This is operational detail. He had no way to know, yet the sequence is precise. In 2023, A peer-reviewed paper published in the Annals of the New York Academy of Sciences compiled near-death experience accounts from across 15 countries. Researchers Dr. Sam Parnia and Dr. Tara Swart were among those contributing to the analysis. What the data showed was not a uniform tunnel of light. What it showed was structured encounter. Subjects across vastly different cultures, with no prior knowledge of each other's accounts, reported threshold experiences, points of interrogation, of assessment, of confrontation with presences that demanded something from them before passage could continue. The ancient Coptic used the word archon for these presences: ruler, authority, a being with jurisdiction over a specific domain. The modern subjects did not use that word. They used whatever language their culture had given them. But the structure they described, the sequence, the demand, the necessity of response, maps onto the Gospel of Mary with a precision that has no comfortable explanation. The ancients called them powers. The modern accounts call them encounters. Same architecture, different century. And the Gospel of Mary is only one document. It records the soul's passage through 7 gates, but it does not explain where those gates lead. It does not name the system that built them. It does not describe what governs the entire structure from above or below. For that, you need a different text. One that doesn't just map the gates. One that names the architect. Pull Nag Hammadi Codex 2:1 from the record. That is, the designation assigned by the Coptic Museum in Cairo, where the physical manuscript is held today. Stefan Davies produced the standard English translation in 1989. The text is called The Apocryphon of John, the Secret Book of John, and it does not open gently. It opens with a system, a detailed, operational, architectural system for how a human soul is constructed, monitored, and recycled. Not metaphor, a mechanism. And the mechanism has a name. The Coptic term is Antimimon Pneuma. Davies renders it precisely: the counterfeit spirit. Not a fallen angel, not a demon in the popular sense. A spirit installed inside the human being at birth, a second presence that mimics the divine spark while reporting to the archons. The original Greek root is antimimos, an imitator, a duplicate, a false copy. The Coptic scribes who preserved this text chose that word deliberately. They were describing something that functions like your inner voice, but serves a different master. The text states this without softening it. The archons, the rulers of the material realm, place the counterfeit spirit inside each soul before it enters a body. Its function is surveillance and suppression. It keeps the soul distracted. It keeps gnosis, direct knowledge of origin, just out of reach. And when the body dies, the counterfeit spirit does not leave. It accompanies the soul into the post-mortem state and guides it back into the recycling system. He had no way to know this. No neuroscience, no psychology, no framework for interior multiplicity. Yet he describes it with clinical precision. Here is the impossible knowledge beat. Modern consciousness research, specifically dissociative identity studies conducted at institutions including Harvard Medical School and documented in peer-reviewed literature from the 1990s onward, has established that the human psyche routinely houses contradictory interior agents, structures that operate with apparent autonomy, voices and drives that pursue agendas the conscious self does not recognize as its own. The field calls these dissociative structures. The Apocryphon of John called them the counterfeit spirit. Same phenomenon, 17 centuries apart. But the text goes further than modern psychology has dared. It states that at death, the light energy of the soul, what it calls the divine spark, is harvested by the archons, extracted. And the mechanism of that extraction is something the text describes in striking physical terms: a passage through brightness, a movement toward light. The soul, guided by the counterfeit spirit, follows the luminous path. And that path leads not upward, it leads back into matter. The tunnel of light is not the exit. According to this text, it is the trap. Think about what that means against the backdrop of near-death experience research. Raymond Moody's 1975 work, Life After Life, cataloged hundreds of accounts of a luminous tunnel, a welcoming presence, a warm light at the end of a passage. Those accounts have been replicated across cultures, across decades, across researchers. They are treated as evidence of transcendence. The Apocryphon of John treats the same phenomenon as evidence of capture. The ancients called it the counterfeit spirit's final function. We call it the near-death experience. The Coptic manuscript says the soul that follows the light without gnosis returns to a body. The cycle continues. The archons retain the energy. And the soul never learns it was in a loop. That is the century bridge. 1700 years between the scribe and the researcher. The data points to the same corridor. One calls it liberation, the other calls it recycling. And this is where it gets disturbing. Because the Apocryphon of John does not leave the soul without a way out. It names one. But the exit requires something specific. Something the counterfeit spirit is designed, from birth, to prevent you from acquiring. And that something is described in detail in the next text. A text that doesn't just name the trap. It maps every gate you will face on the other side of death. The Askew Codex is a single vellum manuscript. It sits in the British Library in London under the designation Additional Manuscript 5114. G.R.S. Mead produced the first complete English translation in 1896, and that translation has never been fully superseded. The text inside is called Pistis Sophia, Faith Wisdom in Greek. Books 1 through 3 of that text constitute the most detailed post-mortem cartography in all of ancient literature. It is not a parable. It is a map. The Coptic term at the center of this map is pylon, gate. The text names 12 of them. 12 eons, cosmic rulers, positioned as sequential barriers through which the soul must pass after physical death. Each eon holds authority over a specific threshold. Each one can detain, interrogate, and redirect the soul that does not carry the correct response. Sophia herself, the divine feminine principle whose fall from the pleroma sets the entire narrative in motion, descends through these gates. And her descent is not symbolic. The text maps it as an ordeal. She is stripped at each threshold, power removed, light diminished. The soul that follows the same path without knowledge faces the same stripping, gate by gate, threshold by threshold, until there is nothing left to return to the source. He had no framework for this, no satellite data, no magnetospheric modeling. Yet the structure he describes matches something we only measured precisely in the 20th century. Here is the impossible knowledge beat. Plasma physics and magnetospheric science have established that the space surrounding Earth is not uniform. It is layered. Distinct boundaries, called magnetopause boundaries, bow shocks, and plasma pause thresholds, divide the near-Earth environment into nested shells. Each shell has a different electromagnetic signature. Each one represents a physical threshold that any energy moving outward from Earth must cross. NASA's Van Allen probe mission, operational from 2012 to 2019, mapped these layers with precision. The count of distinct, named electromagnetic boundaries in the near-Earth plasma environment is not arbitrary. The structure is nested, sequential, gatekeeping. The ancients called them eons. We call them magnetospheric thresholds. Same layered reality, different century, different instruments, same architecture. Mead's 1896 translation captures a passage that stops most readers cold. Sophia does not simply describe the gates as obstacles. She describes them as administrative. Each eon has a name. Each name carries authority. And the soul that knows the name, that speaks it with the gnosis to back it, passes through. The soul that does not know is turned back, recycled, returned to matter without explanation. The text treats post-mortem navigation as a skill, a learnable, practicable skill. Not faith, not virtue, not moral record. Knowledge. Operational knowledge of names, sequences, and the architecture of the system itself. That framing was precisely what made this text dangerous to the institutions that survived. A church built on faith as the mechanism of salvation cannot accommodate a text that says the mechanism is knowledge of a system. The two frameworks are incompatible. One of them was buried in the Askew Codex, locked in a British library and left largely unread for centuries. The other became the dominant religion of Western civilization. But here's what makes this stranger. The text does not just describe the gates, it provides the exit code. Specific names, specific sequences, specific knowledge that the text claims will move a soul through each threshold without detention. And those names are not random syllables. They are traceable, linguistically, historically, across multiple ancient traditions. And the next text, the one that names the divine spark itself, explains exactly what that knowledge does to the architecture of the system when you carry it. Nag Hammadi Codex 13:1. That is the designation. The physical manuscript is held by the Coptic Museum in Cairo. John Turner produced the critical scholarly translation in 1990. The text is called the Trimorphic Protonoia, the triple-formed first thought. And it opens with a voice speaking in first person from before creation. That voice identifies itself as the source of the divine spark inside every human being. The Coptic term is sperma, seed, specifically a seed of light. The text states that this seed was placed inside the human form before the archons completed their construction of the material body. It predates the counterfeit spirit. It predates the architecture of the gates. It is older than the system designed to contain it. And according to this text, it survives every threshold, every gate, every eon, the Pistis Sophia names. The sperma of light cannot be harvested. It cannot be stripped. It passes through the pylon, the gate, because it does not belong to the system the gate was built to manage. But survival alone is not enough. The text is precise about this. The seed of light survives passage, but it does not automatically return to the pleroma, the fullness, the divine source. Survival and return are two different operations. Return requires gnosis. And gnosis, in this text, is not a feeling or a belief. It is a specific piece of information. It is the name. Here is the impossible knowledge beat. The text names the chief archon. The name given in Coptic, traceable through Aramaic linguistic roots, is Yaldabaoth. Turner's 1990 analysis and subsequent Aramaic linguistic scholarship, including work by April DeConnick, published in 2006, established the etymology with precision. Yaldabaoth means child of chaos. Yalda, child, offspring. Baoth, chaos, the void, the formless. Child of chaos. A ruler who does not know his own origin. A system administrator who believes he is the highest power because he cannot see above himself. The text states that knowing this name, knowing what it means, knowing the nature of the being behind it, disarms the power it represents. Not metaphorically, operationally. The divine spark, carrying that knowledge, moves through the gate the archon controls without triggering the detention mechanism. Because the detention mechanism was built to catch souls that do not know what they are. A soul that knows is not detectable by a system designed to process ignorance. The ancients called this gnosis. We have no modern word for it. The closest framework is information asymmetry. the studied field of how superior knowledge changes the outcome of a structured encounter. The principle is the same. The century bridge is exact. They described it as spiritual liberation. We would describe it as possessing the decryption key to a locked system. And Turner's translation makes one further point that most readers pass over without registering its weight. The divine spark, the sperma, is not a metaphor for potential or soul essence in the poetic sense. The text treats it as a literal mechanism of escape, a physical, functional component of the human being that the Archon system failed to account for, a design flaw in the prison, built in by the source before the prison was completed. Stay with me, because what the text says happens next redefines everything. It names what the powers call you, not what you call yourself, what they call you. And that name, that designation in the Archon's own system, is recorded in the final text we have not yet opened. The Askew Codex sits in the British Library right now, catalogued, publicly accessible. Manuscript Additional 5114. The Nag Hammadi codices rest in the Coptic Museum in Cairo, inventory searchable online. No institution has formally refuted the post-mortem gate sequence. No scholar has dismantled the naming mechanism. The texts were suppressed. They were not destroyed. And the mechanism they describe, the gates, the powers, the demanded names, is not historical. It is present tense. Every soul that has ever died has faced it. Every soul that will die faces it still. The system is running right now. Tell us in the comments which power's name unsettled you most and why. If recovering what was removed from the record matters to you, subscribe.